Anne here, and this is More Than a Love Interest, the show where we talk about the arcs of female characters in film. Today, we are wrapping up my favorite trilogy by talking about Elizabeth Swann in At World's End. I'm going to get into how she embodies the theme of the movie, her character arc, and finish with how the male gaze does and does not affect her story. Let's get started.
Elizabeth, they are pirates.
I have had more than enough experience dealing with pirates.
Alright, to kick this off, I just want to say that this is one of my favorite movies ever made. There are a lot of reasons for that, as I discussed in my last video, and as I will be getting into here, but a huge part of that is Elizabeth's character and how she breaks the mold. And I don't just mean that of female characters. She did that all along, of course.
Hang the code and hang the rules. They're more like guidelines anyway.
She was hardly your standard damsel in distress in the first film.
After killing me, what is it you're planning on doing next?
She took control of the situation as much as she could, and that has continued right up until the end of the trilogy.
You have no right.
King?
So what I really want to get into is how she is also put in contrast to several of the male characters, who are not as in charge of their fate as she manages to be.
I've made my choice. What's yours?
So we're going to explore how Elizabeth is given more agency and ownership than really anyone else we see.
What can any of us do?
You can fight!
That makes her really emblematic of the themes of the film, so I want to go through each of the other characters to analyze how our takeaway should be that Elizabeth is the real hero here, the person to be emulated. She gets the speech for a reason, you know?
No, they will see free men! And freedom!
To start with, who is she up against? Who does the movie represent as wrong that Elizabeth must overcome?
This is madness.
This is politics.
Meanwhile, our enemies are bearing down upon us.
Well, I'm actually going to start with Norrington, not because he is much of an antagonist, but instead because of what he represents for her personally. He serves as a warning sign for Elizabeth. If she longs for the order and rules, or the privileges of her youth, she could go home with him.
Your father will be overjoyed to know you're safe. Come with me. Quickly.
But we know how that turns out for him. He had the same chance, and he chose to get his life back, no matter the cost.
Admiral,
You summoned me, Lord Beckett.
brethren know they face extinction. All that remains is for them to decide where they make their final stand.
Which may have put him in the privileged position of admiral and gotten him his cool sword, but we see that this was clearly the wrong choice.
Elizabeth, I swear, I did not know.
Know what? Which side you chose? Well, now you do.
It does not end well for him.
I had nothing to do with your father's death. That does not absolve me of my other sins.
So he attempts to regain his former power by turning a blind eye to how all of this actually affects the people he claims to care about.
What are you doing?
Choosing a side.
And Elizabeth will not be misled by those false promises of safety and security.
No, that can't be true. He returned to England.
Did Lord Beckett tell you that?
Which takes us to Beckett. He has been made a lord and becomes essentially the ruler of the Caribbean, imposing martial law to suspend the rights of citizens.
A state of emergency is declared for these territories. By decree of Lord Cutler Beckett, according to martial law, the following statutes are temporarily amended.
He is ruthless at bargaining and wants, ultimately, to extort everyone around him into working for him.
Bring back that compass, or there's no deal.
He's all going to Jack.
Oh, really? To ensure Mr. Turner's freedom, then? I'll still want that compass.
So you see, Mercer, every man has a price he will willingly accept, even for what he hoped never to sell.
he finds comfort
Knowing the exact shape of the world and one's place in it, don't you agree?
and is very sure of what that is for himself and for everyone else.
Somehow I doubt Jack will consider employment the same as being free.
Freedom. Jack must find his place in the new world or perish.
And of course, this line is pretty pointed.
It's nothing personal, Jack. It's just good business. It's just good business.
Man, isn't it crazy how we have a villain in this terrifying sea monster, but the real villain is this corporate executive who throws his money around to starve people out of their homes, and the people have to unite to stop him?
They've started to sing, so
Finally.
Weird. Anyway, Elizabeth is the first to see through Beckett and realize that he will never hold up his end.
So perhaps you may wish to enhance your offer.
We must find our own avenue to secure your freedom.
Beckett has offered one pardon only, one, and that is promised to Jack Sparrow.
So she differs from most of the characters in that she never tries to make any deals and instead goes directly after what she wants.
And they're not valid until they bear my signature and my seal.
Or else I would not still be here.
She becomes a ruler of the pirates herself, directly in opposition to Beckett.
You can fight and all of you will die, or you can not fight, in which case only most of you will die.
And proves worthy of this appointment by bringing everyone together and being willing to sacrifice herself to ensure everyone's freedom. For her, this battle is not about creating a future for the Caribbean in which she is the most powerful, like Beckett is doing.
We will fight. And you will die.
But rather about giving everyone the freedom to do what they want.
No, they will see free men and freedom!
Freedom.
And then we have Davy Jones, one of two eldritch creatures with whom one might wish to ally.
First to the finish, then?
Holding life and death in the palm of one's hand.
You're a cruel mind. And now ask your favor.
She does not really interact with Jones herself, but I bring him up because he is the dark mirror of Will.
She pretended to love me.
Where's Jack?
Showing the dark side of love as a motivator, something that has obviously been driving Will all along.
After she died, I came out here, looking for my father. I'd die for her.
Oh, good. Now where is he?
And Elizabeth may not be just like Calypso, but there are certainly elements to her character that are
as changing and harsh and untamable as the sea.
I'll come back to Will in a moment, but suffice to say that Elizabeth has the opportunity to continue this cycle with Will that Calypso and Davy Jones are in.
You weren't there.
Is my nature.
But instead chooses constancy and loyalty, not allowing her self-interest to affect how she approaches having power.
It's always belonged to you. Will you keep it safe?
Yes.
So next, her allies also represent worldviews and approaches that do not work out. Barbossa, always Elizabeth's mentor, has a plan to change the status quo as well, by freeing Calypso.
I intend to release her, but for that I need the Brethren Cords.
But his motivation is selfish. He wants her to serve his ends, not to free her because of what has been done to her.
Don't you forget why you had to bring me back.
Basically, he is a rugged individualist who thinks that returning to the former status quo will fix everything.
Better were the days when mastery of seas came not from bargains struck with eldritch creatures, from the sweat of a man's brow and the strength of his back alone.
When this fails to have the results he hoped for, Elizabeth is the one who stands up and calls everyone to order.
By the sweat of our brows and the strength of our backs.
Even if they lose, it is worth it to fight, to make a stand about what they believe in.
Then what shall we die for?
And Barbossa is not permanently changed by this, as I'll come back to, but is willing to be swept along and serve the greater good, even making up for his previous treatment of Elizabeth.
You have no right.
King?
We need you at the helm!
Brace up yours, you cat-headed decades!
Now, Jack and Elizabeth are established as being similar and trying to get what amounts to them as a happy ending. Jack's main character arc in this film is figuring out how he's going to spend eternity.
But eternity is longer still. And how will you be spending it?
If he will indeed.
Stab the heart.
But the idea of having a job to do so is not ideal, and he is ultimately too selfish to do it.
You have to do the job though, Jack. You have to ferry souls to the next world.
Elizabeth has lost her father and any connection she had to Port Royal before she is made Pirate King, and that's when she gives up on Jack's idea of freedom.
The immortal Captain Sparrow. Ooh, I like that.
How can she be free if no one else is?
If there's pirates are gathering, I'm pointing my ship the other way.
The pirates are gathering to fight Beckett, and you're a pirate.
Unlike our other characters, she would never want to be the last pirate.
They'll hunt us down one by one till there'll be none left. But you.
Quite like the sound of that.
Elizabeth did not choose to be made captain after Sao Fang's death, and she's made king because of Jack's shenanigans. But once she is king, she takes ownership of it as her role, while Jack continues to try to avoid being saddled with responsibility.
I have only ever embraced that oldest and noblest of pirate traditions. We must fight to run away.
So as important as Jack was in the previous movie, this one clearly centers Elizabeth as the correct one in their encounters.
I agree with, and I cannot believe the words are coming out of my mouth, Captain Swann.
And finally, Will. He is tied to his destiny even from the first movie.
Pirate is in your blood, boy, so you'll have to square with that someday.
And more strongly in these two films.
A torch of destiny.
While Elizabeth continually bucks expectations and chooses her own path. She's always trying to regain agency and power over her life.
Or else I would not still be here.
I'm here to find the man I love.
And what makes you think I'm in protecting? You got us into this mess. If this is what frees us, then done.
As I said, Will and Davy Jones have similar experiences, motivated by that which vexes all men.
The sea sums the dichotomy of good and evil.
A woman.
Going to great lengths for someone above their station, shall we say?
That was the duty he was charged with by the goddess Calypso.
Well, if you're intending to brave all, hasten to her rescue and so win fair lady's heart.
And they meet their destiny in the final battle.
Calypso.
Both Elizabeth and Calypso are free and able to choose what they want for the future. Calypso does not choose Davy Jones because he's given up his heart.
And you did hide away what should always have been mine.
But Elizabeth chooses Will.
I've made my choice. What's yours?
And she waits for him at the end, breaking this cycle.
10 years I devoted to the duty you charged to me.
And it's not the only one she breaks.
There has not been a king since the first court, and that's not likely to change.
What say you, Captain Swann, king of the Brethren Court?
Unlike Jack or Barbossa, who both have their own goals and are unwilling to do things just for the greater good, Elizabeth is willing to lead the pirates against the East India Trading Company and against Beckett, even if she doubts they could win.
And with the Dutchman, there's no chance.
It's only a fool's chance.
But they do. And then what happens? Barbossa and his crew go off on the next adventure, with Pintel and Ragetti likely to betray Barbossa, just like Barbossa led the mutiny against Jack.
The first mate comes to him and says everything's an equal share. That should mean the location of the treasure, too.
It would make us feel a whole lot better regarding our fortunes if we could see that item you told us about.
And Jack is leaving Gibbs to drink in Tortuga while he goes out in the tiny boat with some new venture he's on.
Curse you for breathing, you slut-jawed idiot!
Never.
Mr. Gibbs.
But Will and Elizabeth do not end up where we met them.
Good day, Mr. Turner.
Good day. Elizabeth.
Will!
They have truly changed their circumstances and reflect a change in the high seas overall. Davy Jones is gone, replaced by Will Turner, who will do his task with honor and constancy.
I would expect the man who made it to show the same care and devotion in every aspect of his life.
He understands he can only go to shore once every 10 years, but he does not resent that stipulation.
It's a steep price for what's been done. Depends on the one day.
His heart may be cut out, but he leaves it with the love of his life, not in the beach somewhere to be used against him. He knows she will protect it because she always has.
Will you keep it safe?
And Elizabeth takes Calypso's place in this arrangement. She may merely be a pirate king instead of a goddess, but she accepts Will's heart, and she's there waiting, 10 years later, to see him again. Unlike Calypso, she was willing to personally lead the pirates to victory. Not that Calypso did nothing, of course. These two ships facing each other could not both have the wind on their sides if there weren't a goddess involved, after all.
The wind's on our side, boys! That's all we need!
We have a favorable wind, sir.
But Elizabeth values freedom and will have it because she put her faith in Will for his loyalty and steadfast nature.
He's noble, heroic, terrific soprano.
And so both of them change their fates, and the fate of the entire Caribbean. Whether Elizabeth remains Pirate King or is on Shipwreck Island 10 years later just to meet Will again, we can have no doubt that she has spent the intervening years making her own destiny.
Done.
What?
So while these characters are all trying to cheat death and change the circumstances around them to meet their own ends, Elizabeth and Will are the ones who successfully do so. And they get a mostly happy ending out of it instead of being stuck repeating their fates. Elizabeth wraps up her character arc in a very satisfying way and still has what she has always wanted. So let's get into that.
Father!
Elizabeth.
Alright, for our second section, we're going to talk about Elizabeth's character arc in this movie. I do think that looking between the two movies is pretty great for the heroine's journey, as shown, but I want to specify that she goes on an arc in this movie on its own. As usual, we are using Maureen Murdoch's heroine's journey. The first step of the journey is for the heroine to separate from the feminine. This was more obvious in the previous two appearances, as we started with Elizabeth at home and then separated from it by the events of the story. So what is Elizabeth separated from when we meet her in Singapore? What does she want to have by the end of the story?
And what makes you think I'm in protecting?
Because she is a well-rounded character, there are a number of things she wants. The biggest motivator right now is that she wants to assuage her guilt and rescue Jack.
Once we rescue Jack, everything will be fine.
But that is just her immediate goal. Her overall goal is, of course, to find a place in the world for her and Will to be together while she can still be free.
The most notorious pirates from around the world are uniting against our enemy, and yet you sit here cowering in your bathwater.
She is a pirate now, and she's not going to give that up, so she is in conflict with Will because she doesn't know if he's going to accept that.
If you make your choices alone, how can I trust you?
All of which is to say that Elizabeth is currently separated from her destiny, and unlike the other characters, she is the one who will have to take control of it herself. The second step for the heroine is gathering masculine allies. There are a number of male characters in the film off of whom Elizabeth plays to figure out exactly how to get to her destiny. So let's briefly go through those, even if obviously we're gonna skip ahead a bit on the journey.
I knew there was a good reason.
Barbossa again proves to be a mentor figure to her, in this case leading her through Singapore and how to make a deal with Cao Fang.
I trust young Turner to acquire the charts, and you to remember your place in the presence of Captain Cao Fang.
He will also be a major part of the culmination of her arc.
Revenge won't bring your father back, Miss Swann, and it's not something I'm intending to die for.
Cao Fang serves the role of masculine ally as well.
Then I guess he has no further need for it.
Well, I suppose if it is worthless, then there's no point in me keeping it.
Both in this opening scene and in a later one.
But one such as you should never be anything less than what you are.
His line here.
It seems the only way a pirate can turn a profit animal is by betraying other pirates.
Is an important stance for her to consider and ultimately decide to reject.
You got us into this mess. If this is what frees us, then done.
Will, of course, is also important to her life. Mainly in this conversation here.
You chose not to tell me.
I couldn't. It wasn't your burden to bear.
Because she is wondering if perhaps her hope for the future is not going to pan out. As the movie continues, he makes several decisions without her.
Why didn't you tell me you were planning this?
It was my burden to bear.
That are certainly not a direct betrayal of her, but are unlike the loyal companion she had known, and they have to reconcile with that.
I understand the burden you bear, but I fear that cause is lost.
No cause is lost, if there is but one fool left to fight for it.
It's only a fool's chance.
And of course, Jack is a masculine ally, though not with the same influence as the last movie. He continues to be a narrative foil for her, however, as she decides what to do.
Jack? This is real. We're here.
Elizabeth, we're not back.
Also, Norrington and Governor Swann are the connection to her past, and these relationships are severed, giving her nowhere to go but forward. It is this line that strikes a chord especially.
Silly thing to die for.
As we see here.
Then what shall we die for?
Because while Jack and Barbossa want to find a way out of the situation, and Will just wants to save his father, Elizabeth is the one who looks at the big picture.
The most notorious pirates from around the world are uniting against our enemy.
There's no place left for Cao Fang to cower. Do you think he will honor the call? The pirates are gathering to fight Beckett, and you're a pirate.
Yes, somewhat for the self-motivated reason of not wanting, and not being able to, go back to her life in Port Royal, but more because she understands that everyone should have the same freedom that she wants.
Prepare every vessel that floats. At dawn, we're at war.
The third step is the road of trials. These tend not to be hugely important to the heroine personally, but allow her to bond with her masculine allies. I would say Elizabeth's road of trials includes everything from the beginning of the movie to when she and the pirates get to Davy Jones' locker at last. As I said, the rescue itself is what has motivated Elizabeth, but it isn't going to go the way she thinks.
He's rescued now, it's done with.
The illusion of success is the fourth step, where the heroine's goal, or trust in her allies, proves to be false. This happens in a few ways for Elizabeth. First, the adventure itself is an illusion of success for everyone. They may have found Jack, but they're now all trapped in the locker, so that's not ideal.
We've come here to rescue you.
Have you now? It's very kind of you.
Second, as I'll get to in the next step, Elizabeth has had this as her sole focus, and now it hasn't actually fixed anything.
You chose not to tell me.
It could have gone worse. I am pleased that she is not portrayed wickedly for being the one who successfully killed Jack, but we're reminded how basically everyone has tried to kill him at one point or another.
4 of you have tried to kill me in the past. 1 of you succeeded.
Don't tell me you didn't enjoy it at the time.
Fair enough, all right, you're in.
And third, having this out in the open does not actually seem to bring her and Will back together.
It wasn't your burden to bear.
But I did bear it, didn't I?
Even if she obviously was counting on that.
How long do we continue not talking?
Once we rescue Jack, everything will be fine.
In any case, rescuing Jack is a success, but it does not help Elizabeth as much as she had hoped. The fifth step, halfway through the journey, is when the heroine experiences a feeling of spiritual aridity and despair. This begins during this conversation, where her tactics from the last movie come back to haunt Elizabeth.
If you make your choices alone, how can I trust you?
If she and Will cannot trust each other, how can they survive in this world of betrayals?
It's by betraying other pirates.
But Elizabeth's true despair is here when she sees her father.
Elizabeth, are you dead?
His words to them have an effect on several characters, like how we see Jack consider this idea.
And you will sail the seas for eternity.
But we see Calypso looking at Will, foreshadowing what will really happen.
That if you stab the heart, yours must take its place.
A torch of destiny.
And it is no less motivating for Elizabeth, who is devastated that her father is dead and that she abandoned him. Will has to keep her from jumping, and as I said earlier, it's this line that motivates her for the rest of the movie.
Silly thing to die for.
She may not have given up hope, but she now understands the stakes. What is she willing to die for?
The pirates are gathering to fight Beckett, and you're a pirate.
The sixth step is called the descent, mythically depicted as the heroine descending to a dark inner place to meet the goddess, and there finding her strength again. While Elizabeth has just returned from the land of the dead, experiencing her darkest moment, it is here that she meets the goddess.
Calypso.
Excuse me?
Of course, she has already literally met the goddess way back in the last movie.
Yes.
But she is mistaken for and treated as Calypso herself on board Sao Feng's ship.
Confirm what? You've told me nothing.
And it also marks a fairly clear independence for many of her masculine allies, including a culmination of the fight with Will.
What are you proposing, Captain?
What be accepted? The girl.
What?
Elizabeth is not part of any bargain.
Out of the question.
You got us into this mess. If this is what Frieza's then done.
Sao Feng kisses her, risking her fury, and meets his end, resulting in a tangible change for Elizabeth. She may not be a goddess.
Forgive me, Calypso.
But she is made into a pirate lord.
Call my place to Shipwreck Cove.
And that gives her a way forward.
He made me captain.
Next, the heroine urgently yearns to reconnect with the feminine. This takes place on the Flying Dutchman, interacting with two characters. First, she meets Bill Turner and talks to him about Will.
Yes, Will is alive. And he wants to help you.
He points out that, for all of Will's determination, he would never pick Bill over Elizabeth.
He can't save me. He can't come because of you.
Me?
You won't pick me. I wouldn't pick me.
Even if they parted on bad terms, Elizabeth now sees what Will is fighting for.
You're his father.
And having just lost her father, she applies his final words to this. Is it really worth dying for to free this one man?
If Jones be slain, he who slays him must take his place.
Probably not.
And if he saves me, he loses you. Tell him not to come. Tell him to stay away.
Second, Elizabeth reunites with Norrington.
Thank God you're alive. Your father will be overjoyed to know you're safe.
She has an opportunity here to be rescued, to turn her back on all of this.
But the prisoners in the brig. The captain shall have my quarters.
But I prefer to remain with my crew.
But she refuses.
I did not know.
Know what? Which side you chose?
She is urgently yearning to reconnect to that destiny with Will that she has always wanted, and now resolves to seek it on her own.
Our destinies have been entwined, Elizabeth, but never joined.
The 8th step is to heal the split with the feminine. The split here is from her own destiny. She was separated from her masculine allies, her identity was mistaken for that of a goddess, and she was given a chance to go back and be who she was before all of this started.
Come with us. James, come with me.
Instead, she stands with her men and serves as their captain, so she goes before the pirate lords to stake her claim as one of them.
Sao Feng is dead.
Made you captain? Just giving the bloody title away now.
The fact that Will...
Who is this betrayer? Not likely anyone among us.
Where's Will?
Not among us.
Is of course disappointing, but she knows her future happiness is here as a pirate, whatever choice Will ultimately makes, and her dedication is rewarded.
I agree with, and I cannot believe the words are coming out of my mouth, Captain Swann.
Now she is the king of the pirates.
What say you, Captain Swann, king of the Brethren Court?
The next step is where the heroine makes peace with the masculine, and she does this with several of her masculine allies. She's already failed to reconcile with Norrington, choosing her own path instead, and disappointed that he will not join her.
I will follow.
You're lying.
So next, and most importantly, we have Will, whom she trades Jack for.
Technically.
I'd propose an exchange. Will leaves with us. And you can take Jack.
This trade informs us a lot of where Elizabeth is on her journey and how she's going to act in subsequent scenes. She's going to think like Will, and make a stand for what's right instead of thinking like Jack.
Think like Jack.
Or everyone else, and relying on tricks and deals. So when she tells Beckett,
"We will fight, and you will die,"
she means it not because they have Calypso or because of any trump cards.
If only there was someone I had not killed inside. And you can accomplish all this, can you? He expects us to honor our agreement.
Eddie Tonic, holding life and death in the palm of one's hand.
I have fulfilled my vow, and now ask your favor.
Why, she's no help at all.
But because she is going to make a stand to ensure it happens.
The Brethren will still be looking here to us, to the Black Pearl to lead.
And then she takes charge as king with both her previous masculine allies to resolve those relationships.
Jack's one of the 9 pirate lords. You have no right.
King?
Captain Barbosa! We need you at the helm!
King?
Of the Brethren Court, courtesy of Jack. Hoist the colours.
Hoist the colours.
Finally, the heroine integrates the masculine and the feminine to self-actualize. When the plans and deals of the rest fall through, Elizabeth steps forward as the true king, asking,
"Then what shall we die for?"
She is the one who understands the stakes, understands what petty squabbling will get them.
By betraying other pirates.
And that is a reality she refuses to accept. She has lost her father and any chance of a normal life.
I'm so proud of you, Elizabeth.
And right now feels she has lost Will to his cause.
I understand the burden you bear, but I fear that cause is lost.
No cause is lost, if there is but one fool left to fight for it.
So she integrates the values they had with what she has learned as a pirate to be an excellent leader.
And with the Dutchman, there's no chance.
It's only a fool's chance. Then what shall we die for?
Standing up for what she believes in and successfully convinces everyone to go along with her.
No, they will see free men and freedom!
She takes charge and leads them to victory. But that is not the only integrating we see happening. We also get to see her working in tandem with Will as they fight off the Dutchman's crew. It's great choreography. And then we get this absolutely fantastic part.
Dearly beloved, we be gathered here today.
Do you take me to be your husband?
I do!
Great!
Will Turner, you take me! To be or what?
I do.
As captain, I now pronounce you Death Kiss.
So the wedding that was broken off in her first scene of Dead Man's Chest is finally realized, in a way that really makes sense for whom she has come to be. She is no longer the pampered daughter of the governor, setting out the fine china and wearing a beautiful gown. Instead, she is the Pirate King, getting married on the deck of a ship while they fight off enemies between their vows. It's just so good. And yes, it ends tragically. But not as tragic as it could have been.
Ready on the gun!
Elizabeth is allowed both her freedom and the love of her life.
Yes.
And honestly, I cannot think of another female character who has a better ending to her journey. Overall, Elizabeth is one of the best characters I have seen. She always has a real arc and self-actualizes by the end of this movie. She has a cohesive journey across the 3 movies, demonstrating how she went from a would-be damsel to taking control of that situation.
I invoke the right of parley. According to the code of the Brethren set down by the pirates Morgan and Bartholomew, you have to take me to your captain.
And approaching her future problems in much the same way.
It shall be the duties of the king to declare war, follow with shared adversaries.
What say you, Captain Swann, king of the Brethren court?
In a movie where destiny and fate are heavily discussed, Elizabeth is the only character who makes her own destiny. She has the opportunity to turn back, but she knows what she wants, and she goes after it with as much tenacity as any of the male characters, and possibly more. And she wins out in the end.
Hoist the colours.
So even if her love story has a tragic turn, it was worth it. As Will says,
depends on the one day.
The price was high, but she has her freedom and has ensured that the piratical way of life can continue while also being able to see the love of her life again, breaking what could have been a curse. Instead, she gets what she wanted, love and freedom, and she's the only character to do so. Alright, to wrap this up, I do want to talk a little bit about how the male gaze affects Elizabeth's story. First, we're going to talk about the more disappointing side of the male gaze, including how it affects the other female characters here. Then a subversion of it, and wrap up with a deep dive into the final scene of the trilogy.
Be accepted, Captain. The girl.
What?
And what becomes of Miss Swann?
What interest is she to you?
So, let's get into the more common examples of the male gaze. In my last video, I talked about how Dead Man's Chest does pretty well with Elizabeth, with really just the one line sticking out as sexualizing her in a way the rest of the movie avoids. And while I do adore this movie, I think this one is a bit of a step down in that department, mostly these bits.
You move. Please.
Now that rule is being challenged by Lord Cutler Beckett.
Against is your fury.
What is the point of these scenes? Like, am I supposed to hate this guy? Are we supposed to think the Singaporeans are even more sexist than the British? Because, like, Ragetti here is not exactly an outlier. Seems like this scene is to get her scantily clad to set up this joke, and well, you go ahead and try to explain why this is funny to my face. I dare you. I'm so sorry, Keira Knightley. I hope you've never had to endure another joke like this again. For the other bit, to compare to the first movie, look how being a captive of Barbossa and being a captive of Sao Fang differ.
You'll be dining with the crew. and you'll be naked. Does not go wanted. Brethren court, not I. The first brethren of fury.
Which again, I'm not really sure the point of.
It's much like myself, but absent my merciful nature and sense of fair play.
It gets Elizabeth made captain, and I do enjoy their battle of wills here.
Pretty speech from a captor, but words whispered through prison bars lose their charm.
But it certainly makes Xiao Fang look bad, you know?
Forgive me, Calypso.
While this is obviously Elizabeth's video, I do want to briefly touch on the other ladies in these movies and how present the male gaze continues to be. We have Calypso, whom I've already discussed extensively, and like Elizabeth, she's allowed to be sexual, even more overtly, without being sexualized by the camera or the other characters.
You want to know me?
Which is awesome, especially for a woman of color in this franchise. Because we also have these women in Singapore, notable for 1, giggling at the mention of Jack.
Jack Sparrow.
2, never otherwise speaking. And 3, dying quickly and for no reason. Their names are Leon and Park, by the way, and Park is killed when Will pulls Elizabeth out of danger. And then Leon obviously swears revenge, but that doesn't go very far. Why couldn't she have joined the adventure with Tai Huang and his men? That sounds like a delightful side plot that could certainly have been part of the final battle. And we have a couple other women around Xiao Fang, but they similarly are not allowed to speak. Mistress Ching is the only Asian woman to speak.
What say you, Captain Swann?
And while she is obviously a welcome and historically accurate addition to the Pirate Lords, I'm not sure it overcomes this whole thing. We had these native women in the last movie, and you can see my other video for why that wasn't exactly fantastic representation. And we, of course, have these 2 white women in all 3 movies, which is interesting. But they are presented chiefly as being sexually available, as are these ladies. And I want to be clear here, that's not bad. It's more a problem that they have almost no personality beyond the fact that they have a history with Jack Sparrow. So that does put a bit of a damper on these films for me.
More steam!
And what becomes of Miss Swann?
What interest is she to you?
I talked more about that in my last video on Elizabeth, specifically how I felt her character fell a bit too much into Jack's gravitational pull from a writing perspective. So watch that if you want to learn more, because that does not actually continue here. And it could have been doubled down. It could have added even more drama to her fight with Will and how the other characters treat her. But instead of that, we have a very interesting pattern emerging. So let's take a look. So the drama of Dead Man's Chest leads up to this. And then this happens. Who does she kiss next? Well, definitely not consensual, but there's Xiao Fang. And then immediately afterward... what about Norrington? Yeah, that doesn't go great either. And finally, she kisses Will for the first time in the movie, and... oh no! What I'm saying is that Elizabeth kisses a lot of dudes in this franchise, and that could so easily have been male gaze-y, showing how hot she is or how available or whatever. Like most female characters who are in an ensemble of male characters tend to get a reputation if they're kissing more than one of them or even one of them, but that is not how it works for Elizabeth. So let's talk about why. So instead of just being the attractive female character who gets around, the narrative takes her side and even empowers her with the kiss of death.
Once is quite enough.
Having the kiss of death is a common trope for a femme fatale.
You come because you need my help to save a certain distressing damsel, or rather,
damsel in distress, either one.
And while Elizabeth is pretty ruthless when it comes to getting what she wants,
I'm not sorry.
this isn't the route we take. Instead, her kiss of death almost mirrors Will's touch of destiny.
Get overboard! Down the road, Spectre! Barbosa!
I've doomed us all.
With good reason. Hold on! Ready on the gun!
In mythic terms, Will becomes a representation of death, ferrying souls to the afterlife.
Do you feel death?
So her kiss of death makes sense thematically as his lover.
Him could come ashore to be with she who love him.
But continuing in a more metatextual sense, it also highlights how a female character with agency, having multiple love interests, can serve to flesh her out more. With Xiao Fang, she is clearly desirable and a force to be reckoned with in her own right.
But one such as you should never be anything less than what you are.
Even if he's wrong about why. And Norrington is of course straight-laced and likes to follow the rules, which highlights that aspect of herself.
Our destinies have been entwined, Elizabeth, but never joined.
And how she rejects it because she's picking a side, not bowing to unjust rules just to keep herself safe.
Your father will be overjoyed to know you're safe.
Did Lord Beckett tell you that?
So they aren't right for each other because of her moral compass.
This doesn't work. And it certainly doesn't show you what you want most.
Speaking of, Jack and she flirt back and forth quite a bit, but really we see that they bring out the worst in each other. Well, the worst in her. She is her most selfish and waffling when spending time with Jack. And of course with Will, she is mostly honest and sure of herself. She is her best self with him and her worst when hiding things from him. So obviously that's the person for her.
I've made my choice. What's yours?
Barbosa!
And what becomes of Miss Swann?
What interest is she to you?
To bring us back to the male gaze, let's talk about the final scene in the trilogy. And why is this male gaze, you may ask? Well, how is it framed? We end on how Will reacts to seeing his wife and son. Which, okay, first, I would say this is an example of male gaze that is fairly neutral. Unlike the other examples, it's certainly not negative. Seeing Elizabeth from Will's perspective is great because he really sees her.
Will Turner.
I'm watching over you, Will.
You look beautiful.
I think it's bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the wedding.
Look at me, stay with me! You're all right! Will, look at me!
But as sweet as it is, it does remind me of how often a male character looking at his family is treated as some kind of closure, when they're basically just like stock photos. It's basically another version of the sexy lamp for the female character.
Stop! Hey, stop! If you don't put that silly thing away, I swear I'm gonna stop loving you. What are you two doing?
We're doing Annie's missing lover footage.
Yeah, you know in movies where the hero's wife or girlfriend is dead or missing, and so he sits in the dark and he watches her in a home movie or
a hologram.
Or hologram. And footage like that for me in case I get kidnapped or murdered.
In this case, our story is at least as much about Elizabeth as it is about Will, so it is a little disappointing not to have much indication of how the last 10 years have been for her, especially since we have a pretty good idea how things have gone for Will.
You have to do the job though, Jack. You have to ferry souls to the next world. Or end up just like John.
things.
So framing this differently, maybe starting from her home, would have given us some much needed perspective before we see Will's side of things. I also want to pedantically point out that, as far as the future of their relationship goes, this is probably not what either of them wanted. Will says,
My mother raised me by herself. After she died, I came out here, looking for my father.
And much of his story is about coming to terms with his father's abandonment. So he probably wouldn't love that for his son.
William, I don't need your help.
Well, Elizabeth has been fascinated by pirates since she was a child, and she may have successfully married a pirate legend. It would be silly to assume that she would just settle down as a regular woman after being a pirate king. We don't know, of course, that she is no longer pirate king, but that's sort of my point. We just don't know what she's up to these days, and that's why this is male gaze.
What?
In any case, that's why this is the tragic ending to the story, while also reassuring us that Will and Elizabeth are not a doomed romance like Calypso and Davy Jones.
Why weren't you there?
Is my nature.
Elizabeth is waiting for him. But why is this the very last moment of the trilogy? Why this and not the sequel bait with Jack?
The devils and black sheep. Really bad eggs.
Well, because pirates did things right. They emphasized the romance because they're telling a capital R romantic story. And that means spending time on the passions of our characters, which is honestly a huge part of why I wanted to make these videos. But what was the last movie you saw where romance was a central part of the plot? Especially a high-stakes, sweeping romance like this. There has been a lot of justified backlash to female characters only showing up to be love interests, but that has unfortunately seemed to have led Hollywood into thinking that we simply don't want love stories. And honestly, it seems to me that a lot of folks are now blind to romantic tropes. And I think y'all should pay attention to how Pirates does it.
I should have told you every day from the moment I met you. I love you.
Will? You're alright, thank God. I came to find you.
Elizabeth Swann, do you take me to be your husband?
I do!
Great!
Especially because of how little screen time the lovers actually share. But keeping them apart for most of these two movies, and in conflict for the third, drives us to be very invested in the relationship being resolved.
He's a pirate.
If there was anything could be done.
Will Turner, you take me! To be your wife!
Like, do you think the stories of any of these three movies work without Will and Elizabeth, or even Calypso and Davy Jones, being in love?
How far are you willing to go to save her?
I'd die for her.
One of you with me! Will is in that cave and we must save him!
I'll start there and I won't stop searching till I find him. And then I intend to return here to marry you.
Come to join me, crew, lad. Welcome aboard.
I'm here to find the man I love.
Release her. She's not part of the bargain.
Yes, Will is alive. And he wants to help you.
Removing the romantic plot threads would unravel the tension of the whole story.
He can't come because of you.
It's me.
To compare negatively to the MCU, they tried to end the Infinity Saga much like this. Except these two barely interacted in this movie, and both had stories about moving on since we last saw them together. So a lot of people rejected this as closure for Cap, let alone for Peggy, because the MCU has always had romantic subplots, but rarely if ever made them essential to the story being told. Whereas Will and Elizabeth are the backbone of this franchise, and so we absolutely had to end on where they are. And they've been separated for 10 years, and we know that they can only see each other for one day before another 10-year separation.
Depends on the one day.
It is at best a bittersweet ending, but it still gives us more closure than this one does. Because Pirates also built to this point. We had the best wedding ever put to film, and high-key the most romantic thing I have ever seen. So compared to Pirates, yeah, no one is doing it like this. This series even makes the love story unspeakably tragic, but they commit to it, and it's incredibly memorable. And other movies really need to take note because I'm getting real tired of it.
Do not forget it was by my power you returned from the dead.
The Will and Elizabeth relationship is an important part of these plots, not just something tacked on or a side plot, but a central aspect of the films, and that is what makes them continue to resonate, to the point of being included in future films after they left the franchise. So it does feel a bit male-gazy to have Elizabeth show up like this. They couldn't have hinted to what she's been doing for 10 years, but otherwise their relationship has always been represented equally to us as the audience. We aren't rooting for Will to get the girl, we're rooting for the crazy kids to get together. Neither are asked to give up what they want for each other, but they work it out by the end. It's really one of the best romances put to film, and a huge part of that is how important Elizabeth is as her own character. I honestly don't know if I'll ever get to see something as great again. Overall, I love Elizabeth's arc in this movie. It challenges her and takes her in a new direction from her previous appearances, forcing her to make difficult choices and determine who she is as a person.
Revenge won't bring your father back, Miss Swann.
Then what shall we die for?
The overarching villain, Beckett, is really her antagonist throughout, while she has very little to do with Davy Jones.
100 years in servitude aboard the Dutchman, as a start.
Technically.
I propose an exchange.
We will fight. And you will die.
But she gets to be involved in all the complex levels of plot, and these provide opportunities for her to learn and grow.
Why not?
See, the Pirate King is elected by popular vote. And each pirate only ever votes for himself. And if he saves me, he loses you.
So even though her ending is a bit tragic, she has still successfully achieved self-actualization.
You will listen to me.
Listen!
I've made my choice. What's yours?
Yes.
And it was hard-won, so we are assured that she will continue to thrive in her strange circumstances. So is Elizabeth more than a love interest? Absolutely. And she also is a love interest because being so does not limit or diminish her character. She is certainly better because of her relationship with Will, and picking him from the other interested parties solidifies who she is and who she wants to be.
Will Turner, you take me! To be your wife in sickness and in health! With health being left lightly!
The love story was admittedly more central in the first movie's plot, but it remains an integral part of the series. It is a sweeping romance, one that has meant a lot to me for a long time. Perhaps someday we'll get another one that is as amazing. But to make a good love story means writing a good story for both parties of the relationship, and that's definitely what Elizabeth has here. She remains one of the best female characters I've had the pleasure of seeing.
Keep a weather eye on the horizon.
Thank you for listening to me talk about one of my all-time favorite characters. Next time, we're continuing the Star Wars series and talking about Leia and her love story.
Half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, join my Patreon, buy me a coffee, all those things so you don't miss it. See you then.